Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. I'm Zineb Riboua, Research Fellow and Program Manager of the Center for Peace and Security in the Middle East at the Hudson Institute. And it is a great pleasure to welcome you all this evening for an important discussion with Iran, on Iran with two of our very distinguished guests. And so as Trump is back in the White House, it seems that there's going to be a lot of changes regarding the Iran policy, great shift from the Biden administration. There are already sanctions on the table. Iranian proxies, such as the Houthis, are now designated as terrorist organizations. Iran is also facing different domestic issues, whether in regards to the economy, but also in regards to recruitment of the youth and so on. And I have with me Mariam Memarsadeghi, founder and director of the Cyrus Forum for Iran's Future and senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. I also have with me Dr. Ladan Boroumand, co-founder of the Abdorrahman Boroumand Center, honorary professor of history at the University of Parma, and co-laureate of the 2009 Lesh Walsia Human Rights Award. And thank you very much for joining me to discuss all of these questions. Let's start by maybe each one of you, Mariam and Ladan, giving us the big picture. Iran's economy is experiencing over 50% inflation, 40% currency devaluation in 2023. There are still protests, even they're not always diffused in the media, but people are really upset about the regime. And yet, Iran is still very aggressive. So can you give us, each one of you, a few remarks to start?
Yes, I think when we want to understand the Islamic Republic of Iran, we need to bear in mind its ideological nature. And so when we put ourselves in our a sort of rational nation states setting, we would think their economy is not good, people are unhappy, etc. But the issue is that from day one, when Khomeini took over, he said, I'm going to provide you with free electricity and housing and so on, but this is not the main goal of our system. Our goal is to impose the rule of God over the whole earth. So they have oil. They don't depend really economically on the society. The society depends on the state more than the state depends on the society. They control the power, the coercive power of the society, so they can repress. And when you say it's odd that with all these problems, they continue to be aggressive outside, this is their essence. They wouldn't exist if they didn't continue that aggressive sort of ideological imperialist dynamic outside their country, the country. For them, Iran was the first step. They said it, they keep saying it, and that's why they are so active and pretty successful outside, whereas they are they are a big failure inside the country. So we need to keep in mind that's their nature.
And do you think, before get to Mariam, do you think that after, especially during October 7th, and with the revival of Hamas and all of these groups, there was a revival in this type of crusade against the West? And do you see that as well?
Yes, and it was, although it led to the complete destruction of Gaza, but the psychological impact and ideological step that getting into Israel, killing Israelis and taking them hostage was an important victory for them ideologically. A taboo was broken. They went into Israel. They occupied a part. They inflicted harm to the Israeli body politic. And I think they don't care about people dying. For them, I'm
Actually,
working on.
It works for them. It works in their favor.
Exactly. They say, Khomeini said, in the early days of the revolution, when the family of the martyrs of the revolution came to visit him, he said, everyone is going to die. Individuals are mortal. So much the better that they die for God. So for him, it was not a problem. Yeah. Contrary to modern state that is created to protect the life of the citizens and their security and their prosperity, this body politic is not created for that. Its goal and its accountability is in the other life. So that makes it pretty invulnerable, because there is no failure. Whether you die for something, or you vanquish, or you occupy Iraq, or you are influential in Afghanistan, it's always a win situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I very much agree. And I also think I've kind of I've reviewed some of my own assumptions after October 7th in particular, and during the time of the Biden administration's appeasement. And I'm not as certain anymore how much of the internal repression and the external terror of the regime is related to U.S. foreign policy. I mean, I still believe that a maximum pressure policy is, of course, much more in favor of U.S. national interests and the interest of containing the regime's terror. But something I've noticed that I think is important is that the Women Life Freedom movement, the revolution that didn't reach a tipping point, actually happened under an appeasement policy, an appeasement posture of the Biden administration. And even though there was a very strong, heavy crackdown, which continues, it was under the Trump maximum pressure policy that over 1,500 people were killed on the streets, much more than even under Women Life Freedom. So it may be that the regime will cut back on its financing of terror, and it will do things like October 7th when Biden is in power, and not do so when Trump is. I mean, we already see, for example, how Jawad Zarif is feigning compliance and trying to appeal to the part of the Trump administration that is much more isolationist and wanting to just have some kind of a deal with Iran. Anyway, I say all that as a background to say that I'm concerned that the Trump policy is going to be a repeat of the maximum pressure policy, but this time it's combined also with an isolationist ethic, and Trump is much more insistent on all I want is a deal. That's all we're interested in. As long as the regime doesn't access nuclear weapons, as long as it does not have the bomb, then he has even said multiple times that the regime can do very well for itself financially. So I advocated recently in a piece for Telos Institute that it's time to get much more honest and much more serious about the threat posed by the regime. After October 7th, I don't think that it's really justifiable, particularly with the response that Israel has given, taking out the air defenses of the regime, taking out its proxies, making it so much weaker in the region. I don't think it's as justified to be so cautious. And economically, through sanctions alone, I don't think that this regime, with this kind of global economy, is going to crumble. And we have the Venezuela example also. So in the piece in Telos, I suggested that a more aggressive posture, but one that is intentionally very limited, of aerial military strikes on the regime is really, what we need to do now. And I don't think that Israel will do it without U.S. blessing, and I think it would be more effective if the U.S. Did so. I mean, that kind of action, we have already seen how popular it can be with the people of Iran, because every time the United States or Israel have taken out people like Soleimani or Haniyeh or Sinwar, there are celebrations in Iran.
Yeah. Yeah, so I would like to basically come back to your point about Donald Trump and maybe working on a deal. I can see that coming really from regime supporters, I would say, who think that the Islamic Republic should be smart this time, should actually work through the soft power, appeal to Trump's affinity for making deals, etc. But at the end of the day, when I look at it, I mean, the regime wanted to kill Trump. They sent very.
But it's the Trump administration that needs to remember that.
Yes, but I think it's true. But I think at the same time,
Not me.
it's going to be a Trump decision. So I think it's a wait and see situation. I'm not sure how you think about it, Ladan.
Well, I don't want to get into the military approach because I think one of the major failures of Western democracies has been over the last 40 years to ignore the importance of ideological warfare with the Islamic Republic. Because when you listen to these people, I want to impose the government of God on earth, I want to change the White House into Husseiniya, something, you think they are crazy. But this is their ideology and they work on it. And we have Muslim community all over the world. And they infiltrate them and they work. And if you do not fight this, the main component of the Islamic Republic war against the West is an ideological war. Terrorism is part of it, but terrorism is nourished by this ideology, and it's this creating and subverting inside this society that is important. So one of the things that worries me about the new administration, the last administration had the language of democracy as human rights, but its actions were literally realist isolationist. And this tension between their discourse and their behavior resulted in the weakening of the pro-democracy human rights ideology. With this administration...
The hypocrisy.
Yeah, but it discredits the ideology.
I know. I'm saying that the Biden administration being so hypocritical actually was destructive
harmed
of
the
their
ideological
own
warfare.
Yeah.
Exactly. So this one is not engaging in the ideological war at all. And what was really worrisome for us is that for the first time in decades, the United States representative at the UN did not vote to condemn the human rights violation inside Iran. All these are indications, signals to the Islamic Republic that, again, the United States is falling short of waging the part of the battle in which the Islamic Republic is stronger. And so we will see, I mean, now it gets also into a larger geopolitical situation with Russia intervening, trying to work between the two countries, and what is the long-term strategic interest of Russia if you put it in the long-term background of their interrelation. Russia has been always a sort of protection for the Islamic Republic and used the Islamic Republic as a nuisance for the West. So Russia probably wouldn't want Iran to have the atomic bomb, but it wouldn't want to sell Iran to America either.
Yeah, you know what I found very interesting? So I work also on the Sahel, and I found something amazing where the Russians went to Niger through Wagner mercenaries. They overthrew the regime. They basically, what they did was troll farms, which is like having multiple telegram channels, pushing as much messaging as possible against the French and against the government. So they overthrew it. They got a military junta. They got deals so that they backed the security. And one of the first things they did was to call the Islamic Republic and say, hey, we have a deal for you on uranium. And next day you have Islamic Republic officials signing a deal with Niger the new military junta on uranium.
Yeah.
I found that extremely interesting in how the Russians do not necessarily want to overpower the Islamic Republic, but they're definitely willing to share the cake.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Mariam.
No, that's fascinating. Anne Applebaum writes very often and eloquently about this, that, we're essentially, there's a block of tyrannical regimes that are countering the democratic world. But the problem is the democratic world hasn't really woken up to that. They're consolidated, they're in sync, they learn from each other, they support each other, they share the cake. But the democratic world, well, first of all, backsliding, but then now in a very overt, proud embrace of not having a role as ideological competitor. And it's dangerous. I mean, it sounds like a funding issue, but it's much more than a funding issue. I know that you're focused on many things. I know that I always learn from your tweets. Africa, Trump was going through the list of African countries and saying, if I'm not mistaken, Lesotho, the country that nobody's ever heard of. But it used to be that presidents used the bully pulpit to educate Americans on how all of this foreign aid we're actually reaping the rewards back from it multifold. That it's the national interest to have ears and eyes on the ground. We're helping to maintain stability or to create stability. But essentially, we're leaving a vacuum, and China and Russia have already filled it to a large extent. They will continue to do more now.
I mean, I totally agree that there's a huge mismatch. I think that's what you're trying to say when it comes to ideological warfare. But the problem is the United States also tried the ideological front for a very long time.
This is true.
I mean, in Africa, it's actually insane the amount of funding that a lot of countries have gotten, but it always gets redirected, either towards funding something that the Chinese were building or some sort, and it was creating issues. And the moment I don't remember if it's Mali or Chad or some country where the Biden administration was basically telling the new military junta that the Russians have put is, we're ready to work with you. However, there's a set of conditions on human rights, etc. you should respect. And next day, they've asked the U.S. military to leave. So that's where I think maybe with the Trump administration, there can be a new way of doing it without having ideological warfare involved. I'm not sure, but I mean,
you get back to the Westphalian order of the world, which was we are basically implicitly in a permanent state of war, all against each other, everyone against each other, a general state of war. And then we will manage bilateral relations, short-term alliances, etc. We have experienced this until 1945. The fact that this dynamic, worldwide dynamic of democratization has encountered many obstacles, doesn't mean that the initial idea was wrong. It means that we didn't implement it properly. What we did in Iraq was not, again, there is always a superposition of your democratic discourse with a behavior that is the traditional behavior. And this clash between your discourse and your acts created a crisis. And today we are in that crisis. What I'm saying, if they are going to continue, they are ideological and they are universalist. So they are stronger. If you concentrate on me, my interest, etc., you will be always isolated.
Yeah.
Nobody will fight for you. So they will be stronger. Communism was stronger. It ended to defeat communism. Democratic or liberal or representative regimes around the world had to come together and had more stronger coalition structures based on these values. If you deny these values, nothing keeps you with others. What will happen then? I mean, you have, for 46 years, the West didn't really care about what was going on inside Iran. And then Iran expanded its influence and infiltrated all the countries until we had the October 7th. So something is wrong on both sides. I'm not saying that what had been done was correct. Nothing was done.
No,
really.
I understand.
You see what I mean? So we need to see what went wrong in this contrast between actions and discourse and fix this instead of saying, okay, we are not going to go to the Human Rights Council and we don't care about the human rights situation in Iran.
If I can say, I don't disagree with Ladan that it's an ideological regime and that it continues to care very much about its ideology. But I think a case can be made that it's also post-ideological. What do I mean? It has become very, very adept, in part through help from Russia, at infiltrating the opposition to it. So the regime, through sort of very historic, traditional means of infiltrating the opposition with real-world people who it sends out from inside Iran and manages to get them very, very close to decision-making centers of the opposition. Through its cyber army, it has managed to really defeat the woman life freedom movement and civic bonds in ways that bullets and torture and executions on the ground could never achieve.
Well, I remember when you invited me for a panel. And so basically, we were speaking,
exactly.
and we got an avalanche of attacks on the. Yeah. And I think they actually hacked someone on the panel, and so they had access to his. I found that crazy.
Yeah, it's not so crazy for us. We see, every day we see it. But the cyber army has come into. Not just the opposition itself, but to the everyday experience of Iranians. First of all, perhaps some people don't know that Iranians spend a lot of time on their smartphones and a lot of that time on Instagram and Telegram and don't have problems accessing these social media. So what the regime has done is created a whole lot of accounts. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if one day, when the regime is gone, we find out that the vast majority of the accounts on social media were actually fronts for the regime. And what it's done is created some accounts that are pro-monarchy, for example, some that are anti-monarchy, some that are pro-different people in the opposition, say, for example, Masih Alinejad or Reza Pahlavi, the crown prince. And what it does is every time that there's some discourse about these figures that is extreme, it amplifies those.
And they fight each other online.
Lots and lots of likes for those extreme posts. And then in the meantime, accounts that look like they're very pro-Pahlavi or they're very pro something else, whose job it is to let me tell you the real story about this person. Like, let me tell you the real story about Ladan Boroumand. And then lie after lie after lie after lie after lie, but always like good propaganda peppered with some truth, with some pictures. Oh, well, yeah, she is talking to that guy. What does that mean? So it's a constant, what they say about disinformation is that giving people enough fodder so that they dismiss. They dismiss the opposition, civic voices, people who've risked their lives, who've suffered severely. They have lost their family members because of their regime, and they come out and they speak on social media. And the power of this cyber army strategy is to dismiss them, to discredit them, to distort what reality is, to create a lot of distraction, and ultimately to create a lot of dismay and people just giving up. I think the power of all of that is as much, if not more, than blinding people intentionally, poisoning schoolgirls, torturing many thousands, raping inside the prisons, executing people, intimidating family members. And it's something that I don't see the West, maybe this is part of the failure of the ideological war, is the West is not really focused on how much power this regime has online.
Yeah, Ladan, I know that, I mean, I was just been aware that you, I mean, I know your story, but also that you've been targeted via cyber attacks and so on. Can you please tell us more?
Yes, I would like to add something to what you said right now. It's very interesting that you said, saying post-ideological. I think you are, in a way, you're right.
Maybe.
No, you're right in that way that over the last 40 years, decade after decade, the Islamic Republic ideology that was controlling the minds and the narrative, the sovereign narrative of the country and even of the dissidents, lost this preeminence. So because of the internet, because of the satellite televisions, Iranians have found alternative narrative. And also they have the voice that is echoed around the world. And so the Islamic Republic, with the Facebook and all these social network, at some point from 2017 onwards, there have been several mass protests where Iranians have said, we don't want this regime anymore. So when
Since 2009.
It started. 2009, they were saying, where is my vote?
Yeah, but
2017.
I always say, sorry to interrupt, I always say 2009
was the beginning of the end.
Death to the dictator was one of the slogans in
yes.
the end, towards the end. And Naqazena Lubnan Junam Fadai Iran
yeah,
started
but that
in
was
2009.
also that was also in yeah, you're right. But they were still talking to the regime.
Absolutely.
In 2017,
Absolutely.
they said, we don't want to talk to the
At
regime.
all.
It's finished. Yeah. There is no reformist, no conservative. All of this is finished. We want a secular regime. That was from 2017, and that was the result. So the divorce between civil society and the state and its ideology is absolute and total. The rupture is complete. The regime, however, was studying and saying how we can win back control over the mind and narrative with this new technological situation. And it seems, and that's where I agree with you, is that they realized that they can't anymore.
Yeah.
So what they opted for is exactly to do what Mariam said.
Intimidation.
So instead of coming
out,
instead of coming out as pro-Islamic Republic and attacking us as the whores of the Mossad or the CIA, what they say, they come as extreme monarchists, which also reproduces many of the values of the system. For instance, they define Masih Alinejad as the wife of her husband. Instead, is denying her the agency of a free woman.
They're being respectful.
Yeah, yes. No, I want to say they transfer the values of the system into a sort of authoritarian, monarchist, nationalist ideology, and they attack us and then they do exactly what Mariam said, which is they can't say we are the best, but they can destroy the alternatives.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so the destruction is much easier, and they will remain by default.
You know,
they know because their own children have divorced themselves from their parents, that they have no legitimacy. Their own children are living in the West, and not only living in the West, but living hedonistic Western lives. Even inside the country, they're driving luxury cars. Everybody in the regime knows that the regime is detested by the people and that no one believes that they represent God. The ideological stuff is a function or is a...
It's a facade, basically.
Well, it's a facade, but it works for its external stuff.
Yeah.
It works for its foreign policy. It works for...
Yes, because then you have people telling you, oh, you don't understand. It's an Islamic republic. It has this vision.
I would even,
and I'm like,
yeah,
you
I
know,
would even go farther.
It's like
I
all
would,
these like, you know, these ultra-Islamists elsewhere, and you always like find him as the biggest drunk and like, you know, these type of things. It's
I would even go further and say, I say this very confidently, that the amount of respect and allegiance that this regime has on the most elite college campuses of the United States is much, much more than it has inside the country, even among people working inside the regime.
But do you mean
so if you're in a Yale or Harvard, yeah, I mean, there's some kind of an appeal. There's some kind of a mysterious appeal. I think, like you were saying, the fact that it's anti-American, is anti-Israeli, was started with a revolution. It's horrible, but those are the reasons. That's what the appeal is.
What do you say to that?
Well, I think that's true. Nobody believes. It's like the end of the Soviet Union. The high cadres of the regime didn't believe in it, and but until it's the institutions are there, it's dynamic. The ideology is presided over by its dynamic, even if people don't believe in it. It will change, it might change if there is a coup and the ideology is changed into a sort of oligarchic, like Russia's, secular system. But we need to see this change in ideology. And I think we should not dismiss, especially for foreign policy, the impact of their ideology. That's very important, I think.
Yeah, and I would like more to talk about, the type of transnational repression. Yeah. I mean, we've met last week with a very notable scientist, and he's based in Spain, and he has a committee. And one of the things he did was actually to advocate for Iranian opposition and diaspora, so they at least get a voice when they talk to parliamentaries and decision makers in Europe. And I was surprised because when meeting him, there were 3 guards with him. And then we asked him what happened, and he says that basically the regime paid someone to go after him and to basically kill him, to the point where he was going to be in a coma state. Yeah. And thankfully, he survived it. But since then, he's been receiving numerous threats. The United States also, I mean, Mike Pompeo, John Bolton, all these people have been targeted.
I think we just issued, we just put on our website, I think if you are interested, you can see an interactive map of Islamic Republic's transnational repression, threats and killing. And I can tell you that roughly, I'm not sure we have all the information, every case, but we have documented 452 killings of Iranian dissidents outside the country since 1979. And this transnational repression is very important. It comes also with threat, intimidation, cyber attacks. My father was killed by the Islamic Republic in 1991 as part of a vast program of eliminating all the notable figures of the opposition. Many people were killed in France, in Germany, in Austria, in Italy, everywhere, in Switzerland, in America, less in America because the Iranian embassies are a very important center for logistic and all these things. Yeah, and since Iran has no relation with diplomatic relation, they have less freedom of action here than they have in Europe. And one of the important things to do, I think it was part of the questions that we had, this project of ours, we launched it because we want to do advocacy for a sort of coordinating task force to hold the Islamic Republic accountable for its crimes outside the country. I mean, I was really stunned when the attack on Salman Rushdie happened.
Yeah.
That was based on a verdict issued in Iran with a money promised by Iran by a guy here who was connected to the Lebanese Hezbollah. And it went as a sort of law enforcement thing. I mean, the state didn't say, the government of the United States issued nothing about it. It went to under, normal, ordinary crimes. And I think that is something, this is a violation of the sovereignty of these countries where the Islamic republics come and implement its laws on their territories.
Yeah.
So it's not an ordinary law enforcement issue. It's a political violation, an ideological attack, and also a crime. And it should be treated as such. So that's a very important issue. And I hope at least President Trump doesn't like people who attack him personally, so he should take this matter very seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ladan mentioned her father, and of course the very important work that the Boroumand Center does is documenting the killings of the regime systematically. Believe it or not, as a case, a study for what I'm talking about with the regime cyber army, the cyber army and general infiltration of the regime. Individuals who have aligned themselves with the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, real world people. They have faces, they walk around, you can see them, they live in the West, have gotten behind a campaign to discredit her father, who was killed by the regime, and discredit the institution that is devoted to the killing, devoted to the documentation of the killing of the regime. And they are doing this in the name of the Crown Prince, Reza Pahlavi. They're not doing it for ideological reasons of the Islamic Republic.
Sorry, just to follow.
Yeah.
They used Reza Pahlavi's name to...
They are strong supporters of Reza Pahlavi. Like every day, what they do is promote Reza Pahlavi. And then alongside that, they attack people like Ladan, or they attack people like me. So they gain the credibility. These are people who just a few years ago,
I see.
they're just a few years ago, they were writing for regime outlets. Or they supported Qasem Soleimani. But then very quickly, they were adopted by the opposition, or they were serving even in elected office, or they were promoting the election of Rouhani. These are all very recent events. It's not like they broke off from the regime 20 years ago. They come to the West, they get very close to the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. They post a lot of pictures of adoration, idolatry, constant, and they actually get physically close to him, believe it or not. And what they do, though, interspersed with all of that pro-Pahlavi messaging, is attack Ladan, attack Masi, attack Narges Mohammadi inside the country, attack Nasrin Sotoudeh inside the country, attack Toumaj Salehi inside the country, attack Hossein Ronaghi inside the country, or make sure that no one ever says anything positive about these people when they have come into some kind of attention, they've received an award, or that somebody has just been lashed 74 times. This is very unfortunate.
That's very interesting. So they are actively working on discrediting the opposition, but also making sure that they always fight each other.
But yes,
absolutely, exactly.
It's very intelligent. I think this is a real soft war they are waging against us. So they use keywords: funding, human rights. Funding, human rights. So what they do basically, they gain on two. Not only, for instance, we have been working for 24 years now. And for 24 years, for instance, we have paid 177 employees and consultants. And the total amount of money, that is public actually, because we are a charity, non-profit charity, is around $16 million.
Total.
24 years, 177 employees. If you count it on average, my sister and I, for the 6 first years, we worked without salary in order to pull this thing up. And if you add the two of us and divide by 24 years, the amount of money that we've had, it comes to $3,500 a month as salary. So it's really, it's really not very important because money was not our issue. And so, but what they say, the Boroumand sister got $17 million of American taxpayer money to do nothing. Of course, they don't mention all the work that has been done.
They don't say U.S. taxpayer money. They make it seem as if it's money that the Iranian people gave you.
Yeah, but sometimes they also say the taxpayer money. And so our two faces are associated with $17 million and nothing for the Iranian victims.
Yeah, no,
but also it's connected, and they do it with every single human rights organizations that try to use the levers of international levers to put pressure on Iran. So it's very intelligent because they discredit the very concept of human rights. And so they prepare the ground for an ideological transition to another secular authoritarian regime. And this is the most dangerous, and we haven't been able to find a way to counter it. Because if we start to respond to these people, first of all, we don't want it to respond to the Islamic Republic because we know it comes from there. Yeah. Second, we have so much work documenting their crimes that we have to put aside this important work to just respond to those people who are not interested in our response because they want just to attack and discredit us.
It's bad faith.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
So this is the challenge that the current opposition and dissident movement and the diaspora is facing, whereas when the women life movement broke out, the Islamic regime realized the potential, the subversive potential of a unified diaspora, which worked in symbiotic correlation with the inside movement.
Yeah.
And what they have focused on is to destroy this symbiotic relation. And they have been quite successful.
Yeah, this is such a great point because it reminds me of what the Assad regime was doing. Exactly the same type of tactics. I mean, of course, I'm not Iranian, so I'm not involved in any of this, but I'm from Morocco, and I've seen something amazing where, in the sense that, for example, in Europe, when Iran or the Islamic Republic wants to target someone, they don't send, a Frenchman from Bordeaux or something else. They send a Moroccan radical guy from the banlieue of Paris. They know that Morocco normalized with Israel. They know that Morocco has a huge ban on any type of Islamic Republic things, but even further, because Morocco is a monarchy and follow the Sunni Maliki doctrine, they have zero tolerance when it comes to terrorism and anti-women, anti-type of discourse. So they go and hire that guy, so that when he does something, at least it's the Moroccan. This is the framing. So you never thinking about the guy who hired him, which is the Islamic Republic. And they did the same thing in Israel when they go and target. and they do the same thing when they go to Israel. They go after Azerbaijani-born people because they know exactly that Azerbaijan has a great relationship with Israel. And it continues, and it's very clever what they're doing.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, if I can, because I want to get into some real-world issues that lead to solutions. People will remember the Women Life Freedom movement in Iran because it was so massive. It covered every geographic area of the country, every economic class, every type of lifestyle, and it galvanized the diaspora throughout the world, and the diaspora sustained protests inside the country. They sustained protests, labor strikes. It was massive. It was really massive. And for several weeks, there was pressure on the opposition abroad following the killing of Mahsa Amini to come together, to create some kind of representative unity so that the movement could lead to the overthrow of the regime. And the hope was that if there is some kind of consolidation of opposition forces abroad, then the revolution inside the country can be helped. So there was a meeting at Georgetown University, now it's called the Georgetown Coalition. Prior to that meeting at Georgetown, unfortunately, a lot of the top supporters of the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi opposed this coming together of opposition forces. After it was created, they were very antagonistic toward it. Ultimately, the Crown Prince exited that group or coalition. Since then, a lot of the energy and the momentum that had existed prior to up to the Georgetown Coalition has been lost. And even before the Georgetown Coalition meeting, the Crown Prince had a press conference at the National Press Club here in Washington, and he said, I thought very wisely, that soon there will be a coming together of opposition forces. He was very hopeful. They will create some kind of a constituent assembly. I will not be a part of it. I will support it. I will support everybody. After the breakup of the Georgetown Coalition, slowly but surely, that discourse has changed from I'll be behind everybody and I will support everybody who believes in democracy and a transition to a democratic form of government, whether it's monarchical or a republic. That has changed to, and we can show how the cyber army and the infiltration of the regime has played a pivotal role in this transformation to, I'm the leader, everybody get behind me. So as before he was saying, I'm behind all of you, I support all of you equally, I will not endorse a particular political party. Now it's certain types of people who have come behind him and have reinforced this discourse that he is the king. He himself has come out several times, including in the last couple weeks, don't call me the king, don't call me the Shah, don't press forward about all this monarchy stuff. And then again, his top people, his top supporters, even top advisors, his entourage have immediately doubled down on this, calling him king, even calling him God, Khudavand. And so it's really not clear how the opposition is going to again come and be unified, because the actual people who used to be part of the Georgetown Coalition, none of those are involved in this new configuration that is supporting Pahlavi. So because the people who supported Pahlavi systematically denigrated and discredited those people. Hamid Ismailion, Masih Ali-Nejad, Muhtadi, Shirin Ebadi, Nazanin Bunyadi, Golshift Farahani. I'm forgetting maybe one or two people.
So from your point of view, Ladan, since you've been watching this for a very long time, discrediting the opposition, and Mariam told us about all the issues the opposition itself is facing when it comes to messaging, etc. What do you make of that? What do you think? It seems that much of the hope is more on U.S. foreign policy than the formation of an opposition then.
For some people it is, but I think, so we said, we talked about we call opposition, but there is another layer. I'm sorry, I'm a human rights activist, and also I have seen how competing Iranian human rights organizations over the years have worked together, created a coalition that has been very active at the UN level, at all its international fora, and has worked very well. And the Islamic Republic knows that because they know that the Iranians, because they have common values, although they really compete for financing because the funding is limited, but all these organizations have been working together for over 2 decades now. in a very efficient way, throwing out Iran from the Women Commission at the UN, creating a fact-finding mission for women life freedom movement, and renewing the mandate of the special rapporteurs on the situation of human rights in Iran. And they know it because they come with an army of gongos, false NGOs, to influence the diplomats of different countries at the UN. And one of the reasons that they are fighting so strongly against the human rights groups, and they are trying to discredit them and calumniating them, is exactly because they know that these people have been efficient on these, using the international levers that are at their disposal. For the opposition, I think it's the most important thing, really, is to put pressure, and the diaspora can do that by influencing the policymakers outside Iran, to put pressure so that the Islamic Republic is forced to mitigate its pressure inside so that people could organize inside. Because it's not you at 5,000 kilometers away from Iran without connection, networking, and organization inside that can do something. So our work here, and also the diaspora, even opposition figures who think they are political parties, we cannot have, you have no political parties with constituency. The constituency is in Iran. You have no structural dynamic relationship with this constituency. So you are a club. You are a diaspora club, and you call yourself a political party. That's not how it works. So our work here is to pressure and to convince policymakers that this Islamic regime is detrimental to the interest of peace, prosperity, and stability. And the only way to overcome the long-term crisis of the Middle East is to force this regime to mitigate its pressure and empower the social stratas inside Iran to organize and create a dynamic for change. This is our work here, and I think that's where we should focus on, instead of creating alternative program for the future of Iran. Would it be a centralized government, a federalist? That's why they are fighting over in their clubs and on their stupid
what I was talking about
social media.
One of the ways that the cyber army works is by creating distraction. It is capitalized on one of the ways that the opposition has always distracted itself, is this debate over, is it going to be a republic or is it going to be a monarchy, as if everything else has been solved.
Yeah,
and this is just, now we need to think about this. I mean, the Crown Prince himself has been so insistent for so many years that this is a waste of time, it's a waste of human resource. But unfortunately, he's surrounded by people who are very proudly and on a daily basis pushing this.
I mean, just to go back to the U.S. foreign policy point, where what I see is actually a lot of opportunities here, in the sense of, especially after Israel's pagers attack on Hezbollah, the collapse of Hezbollah, not just in Lebanon, but also in Syria, Turkey being able to actually rise and be a counter, not just to Iran, but also to Russia. Saudi Arabia, I mean, I was amazed by MBS' speech the other day.
I know, me
and
too.
his interview, basically.
Ijtihad.
Yeah, basically speaking about how Saudi Arabia is taking a totally different path when it comes to not just modernizing, but really reforming. That's very deep. That's something you get killed for.
I was going to say, very courageous.
Yeah, and he did it. And so the Middle East is changing, and Iran is getting, stuck with the Islamic Republic ideology. And then I wonder, for the youth, especially, they're looking at the Middle East changing around them. Yeah. And so when, for example, the Biden administration does not align with its allies, Saudi Arabia and Israel and others, it sends the wrong message to the youth as well, who are looking into these countries to basically revive some sort of new Iran that is more in the present.
Unfortunately, Iran is a country with such severe brain drain that I don't even think that youth in Iran expect anything at all from the regime. The only thing that they hope for is that it can be overthrown, or they're actively pursuing their own immigration. You know, we've seen so many people leaving the country. They're always the very best people. You look at the universities, Stanford, engineering programs, all the and so many startups. So many. At this point, not startups, but the very best of the Silicon Valley companies are, have Iranians at the very top. And you mentioned MBS, the Ijtihad thing, and his vision for the future, which they're rolling out in a very effective way. It seems like I'm not sensing much blowback or resistance. Or in Morocco, the solar energy installation that is the largest and most sophisticated in the entire world. All these things are happening in the Middle East, but yesterday in Iran, a man was lashed 74 times because of a song in which he supported the rights of women to dress as they choose. I mean, the juxtaposition is just enormous. But a lot of it. We focus at places like Hudson on U.S. policy or in general Western policy or Israeli policy, but I'm sorry if I talk too much about the opposition. I'm just extremely disappointed because a lot of it should be coming back to us and our responsibility. Look at this enormous diaspora and how much money this diaspora has, and yet they can't come together.
Conclusion remarks, Ladan?
I think we need to overcome this challenge. We need to find a way of fighting back against the Islamic regime's soft war against us, and to reconstitute a degree of civility. But I think it's also a problem of everywhere. It's a worldwide problem. I mean, I see this in France with the French politics. It's everywhere. So we are also always influenced by what is happening in the world. There is a sort of authoritarian fashion, ideology, and Iranians are also following the fashion. As in 1979, many, even the Islamists, were Marxist in their structural thinking. And so it's a global challenge for democracy, and we need to find a way to fight back. The problem is that we have a state against us, but we are not like de Gaulle, who had also a state protecting him. And we need to, and that's what we should focus on instead of fighting each other or discrediting each other. We need intelligence. We are not strong enough to fight alone against a state. Yeah. A state that is supported by China and Russia. We need it's not the $17 million for 24 years and thousands of documentations that we've done that can help us do that. We need real help.
Yeah. Well, Ladan, Mariam, thank you very much for all the work you're doing, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you for giving us a chance to speak.
Thank you.